Hey, welcome to the One Life podcast. This is episode 1, which is pretty exciting. It's the first time we're kind of giving this a real shot. We did a practice few episodes. You can see like episode 0.001 and through 0.003, which is pretty awesome. But my name is Sarah Inman. I'm the communications director here for One Life Network. And we're going to just kind of sit around. We're going to talk about maybe some things from our messages from the previous week. And also just kind of some things about what it's like to live this one and only life that we have. So to my right, I have our lead pastor, Bret Nicholson, and Bret will basically kind of be leading a lot of the conversation and asking some questions and being able to share some things, just some more thoughts, because we know a lot of times he has a lot more that he wants to be able to share, but doesn't always have the time to get to it. So we're going to take some of the opportunities to learn some more from him throughout the weeks as we hear some of the things that God has put on his heart. And then to my left, I have one of our campus pastors from One Life West, Matt Breivogel, and Matt's going to be here hanging out talking about some of his thoughts as that as well. And then on the end over here we have Ryan Nunn, campus pastor from One Life Henderson. So just an opportunity for us to sit around and chat and hang out and talk about some cool things.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
All right.
So
good setup.
Yeah, thanks.
Way to go.
I really practiced it.
I know, you can tell that. That's right.
You didn't.
Teleprompter.
Yeah. So Bret,
yes.
Can you kind of give us just a little rundown, a little feedback, or not feedback, give us kind of like an overview a little bit about what you talked about on Sunday, kind of kick off the conversation from there.
Okay, well, and it was from the story of Mephibosheth, which, half the study time was figuring out how to pronounce that name. and the idea was kind of reversing back. It was, I wanted to do something about the local church. I wanted to do something about the family of God. And I went to the team and I gave kind of proposed titles and ideas to how to do that. And I was kind of leaning towards welcome home, something kind of cheesy like that. And I think I wrote the table on the board, and everybody went with the table. So I did a search for how many times in all the different places where the table is used in the Bible. And that was one of the stories that kind of surfaced. Like it's used a lot during that story. And so, and I was reminded, I think I heard a sermon on it like back in college and started there. And so the story itself is there's a son who was the best friend of David. He's looking for somebody to be kind to, and he finds him. He is crippled in his feet, and he finds him and he kind of restores him. He gives him this lottery winning moment sort of thing where he not only says, I'm not going to kill you, but I'm going to give you everything you've ever needed. I'm going to welcome you at my table. And most people, and including myself, believe it's a portrait of Christ and what he's done for us in the church. So that wasn't a very good explanation of it, but
I thought it was great.
You should, I appreciate that. Yeah, but you should listen to the actual message because I explained it just a little bit better.
I think the real question is, how often do you have to use Google for your sermons?
Well, that wasn't from Google. I will have to say that. I do. I like to do word searches, and no, I didn't. It was like a Bible.com or some such thing, and just find all the table references.
I honestly had never heard a sermon on Mephibosheth in my whole life, so I'm proud that we have one.
And so you got nothing to compare it to. So it may have just been like the most amazing
sermon on Mephibosheth I've ever heard.
Sermon in the history of Mephibosheth sermons in your life. So please don't listen to another one. So how many more could there be out there, though?
I don't need to hear anymore.
This is so good. You're right. That's right. So
Mephibosheth.
Mephibosheth.
I just wanted to say it. It's one of those words. There's certain words out there that someone says and you have to repeat it. And that's one of those.
Exactly. And that's why I said during the message that we ought to have a T-shirt that says "I am Mephibosheth," because first of all, no one will know what it means, but second of all, I think it would attract attention and would communicate tons.
I really feel like I heard it West on Sunday where like you said it and then I heard someone behind me go, Mephibosheth. Like they said it out loud. Like they had to say it too. It's like you can't not say it.
And then you try to spell it. And I couldn't spell it. I've seen it 1,000 times now and I still couldn't spell it.
That's fun.
So let's hopefully I pronounce it right.
Well, okay. So talking about the table series, talking about obviously for me, what I thought was just amazing was thinking of this idea that there was no reason for this man to be at David's table, and yet David made a spot for him. Like, that's amazing. Like, it's a beautiful story. I told Matt after the message, I was like, this sounds weird, but I was like, I want to turn that into like a Broadway musical. Like, there's this beautiful story of like this where you start, right? it seems like an idea that could turn into something
there.
because it starts out with like, you know, this broken like relationship and ends in this beautiful ending and story, and obviously, you know, you can share the gospel through that.
That's true. Please, no one steal that idea. I think I
copyrighted
think that ought
it
to happen.
yesterday before we started this
absolutely.
podcast.
That's right. It's even good for a name and on a you know, billboard or whatever, and it's a great title for something.
Yeah,
and it's a great name to sing.
Ooh,
you could build in all kinds of drama, and story is just it's all there. I can see it.
I also have to say this too. My dad passed away recently, and I think I said in a sermon a couple of weeks ago, right after it happened, that he used to get on me a lot about, you need to do the stories, Brett. You need to do the stories in the Bible. And he said that through my whole life, like these stories back here. And that was kind of what surfaced for me as well. Is like, but because it really is, it would make a great Broadway musical, and it's one chapter. It's got a little bit of backstory, but it's basically one chapter that is just layers and layers and layers of richness. And I guess what I would like to ask you guys is, as you heard it, as you thought about it, what were some of the ideas that kind of sprung to your mind, or what struck you the most, or what inspired you the most, just listening to that story, the picture it created?
You know, I always think about, when I think about David, I always, as cliche as it may or may not sound, you can't help but think about all the things that he just screwed up. Like, it's royally, right? And so I love the way that he, no matter what, like he still reaches for this ability to show kindness, is what the scripture says, I guess, to somebody in Saul's family. 15 years down the road. And then, I don't know, I think that was one thing that really inspired me more than anything, because that's a foreign concept for the most part, you know, in culture at large, is this idea of really that kind of forgiveness and making something like that right would just be seemingly utter nonsense, you know, today in modern culture. And so, I don't know. It was probably nonsense back then as well, but it just seemed pretty like a really, really powerful, impactful thing that he would honor that.
Well, and speaking of one of those things that I didn't get to, you know, as I was trying to paint a thumbnail sketch of David and Jonathan had a covenant that he was honoring, but they did that between friends back then. They would, and families. And I wanted to delve into that more, because they based love and expressions of kindness based on promise and commitment, rather than just, you know, kind of fleeting moment feelings and things like that. It always kind of struck me. So 15 years later, after someone dies, you can honor your word. Hey, I said I would do this, and I've got to get out there and do it. And that was very impressive. Good point.
I'd never heard that, the covenant thing. I didn't know that was a thing in ancient world until Sunday. So.
Oh, really? Well, see, that's right.
You're there, man.
Had you heard a sermon on Mephibosheth?
Never. No, I read the story a couple times.
Once again, the greatest Mephibosheth sermon in Ryan's life. That's one of them.
No, I was just gonna highlight I feel like a lot of times you hear the word covenant a lot. I'm not sure if people understand like always what that means, but I mean, and I could be completely wrong, but I will be wrong on this podcast a lot. So the covenant, I mean, it's another word for promise and testament. Am I correct in this, Bret?
Say that one more time.
Covenant, it's another word for testament, like New Testament, Old Testament, and also just promise in general. So kind of giving people some, I don't know, just giving another viewpoint of what that word means.
It's formalized promise is probably the one way to say it. I mean, we have it's a contract plus deeper relationship. It's marriage is the closest thing we have, you know, that is considered a covenant. It's the same basic idea. It's legal, but it's also relational in a lot of deeper ways. So
would there have been ramifications of, like, what would breaking that covenant look like in that culture? Do you know? Anybody know?
I know that they would say, there's this line they use all the time in the Old Testament, especially. They say, "May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, that if I break this, you know." And I don't know what that means. If God does honor that, like if I broke the covenant, okay, I'm going to deal with you ever so severely. I don't know if there's any actual accounts of God saying, "Hey, you told me to deal with you severely, so here it goes. You broke the covenant." But they would kind of, and I think they did some things where they would maybe put those conditions on it. If I break this, something would happen to me, or I would do that against myself, or something like that. So, hope you choose your friends wisely.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Well, I mean, I love the cultural context you gave. How, you know, it had been commonplace for, you know, someone who became king, if he wasn't in the line of the previous king, that they would decimate anyone in that previous king's lineage to secure their children's lineage, who would then be king following them. And so for him to welcome Mephibosheth to his table meant so much culturally. And then you really played up that when David told Mephibosheth, "Don't be afraid," And that stood out to me like crazy on Sunday. And there was a reason Mephibosheth should be afraid, but what he didn't know was what he was going there for. And so this phrase came in my head, the character of the king. And if he would have known that, what he was going there for, he wouldn't have been scared. And so we know this now. So I'm thinking, how do I translate that into my life? And so when I think of telling people about Jesus or living out my faith, it's like God has this bad rep in our culture because people think of his character as evil or nasty or judgmental. And it's like, maybe I'm doing a bad job of showing people the character of the king so they can approach him without being fear or without any hesitation or without these barriers that are put in place from their presuppositions of what he might want from them. And so I was just trying to play that out because, this is a beautiful picture of the character of Jesus and how he welcomes people to his table. And I was like, okay, well, maybe it's our job as the church to help show people that how to welcome them into the table, show what the character of Jesus truly looks like.
Yeah, I love putting myself in the and maybe it's subjective, so I suppose be very careful with this. But in Bible stories, I love to put myself in the place of the characters, especially someone like that, because you can feel their emotions, and I think you can do it accurately to a point because there is a universal quality to human experience. I mean, if you knew there's the threat of you possibly being killed at any given day, every time you sat in your car, it might blow up or whatever else. I mean, you would have a certain personality thing. You would be fearful, and you would be anxiety ridden. You'd be wound up really, really, really tight. And then if you were finally called before that person, it would be horrifying. It would be a horrible thing. So that's one of the things I love about the stories is that there is a true human quality to it. On that score, like I'm going ahead and taking for granted, maybe we can debate whether or not you can take that picture and apply it to our relationship with Christ. I go ahead and just kind of say it because they've done it throughout church history. Mm-hmm. But was there something that helped you that as you saw that picture personally, now you're a little bit, you viewed God, maybe not differently, but you view your walk with the Lord a little bit differently. Just something that helped you in that, or kind of woke up something in you or renewed something in you?
I'm a visual person in general, so I always see pictures when I'm hearing stories. And the idea that multiple times it says that he was lame in both feet, like it made me visualize someone having to carry him. Right. And it just I just started thinking about that personally, like how many times in my life that I always try to think that, well, I can get to the table myself, this metaphorical table, but literally being to the point where someone has to carry me there. Like just that visualization of seeing that made me think of like Jesus carries me to the table himself. Like, I mean, it's just because I can't get there. And so it really, I don't know, it made me think of it in this beautiful picture, like not just something that I say, but like something that I can see.
And as it brings that out, though, I kept thinking about that. I keep thinking because you really have to stress, if this is a portrait of grace, which I believe it is, it's really communicating you don't have anything to commend yourself before God, which is supposed to be good news. But it can be, it sounds like bad news. Why do people take it as bad news? Why would you think you think there were people there on Sunday that kind of reacted negatively against it, like what was said?
I don't know. I think what the message did for me is I think it's always good to do is to be reminded of my dependency, right? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like the gospel or the good news of Jesus. It kind of it just reminded me a Sunday morning, okay, right, like you've really done nothing. You have nothing. And so I wasn't necessarily offended. I can't imagine being offended because it really pointed me towards God's goodness, right? So kind of his character and who he is, and the fact that absolutely there's not a thing that I did, right. But yet I can walk in hope, and I can walk in absence of fear, as you were talking about a minute ago, right. Regardless of what I do or don't deserve. So I don't know if people are feeling, but that big idea of me being reminded of my dependency on our Creator God.
But it lays it on pretty thick that you have no goodness
absolutely.
Of your own. I mean,
and then you have that offensive line where Mephibosheth says, "What is your servant that you should show regard to a dead dog such as I?"
Oh yeah,
that's how he thinks of himself, right. And it's almost like you have to lower yourself to such a degree. And in a very helpful time in my life understanding this is better understanding the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector, where you have the Pharisee who's praying to God about, following the law so well. And the tax collector's over off the side crying out to God and beating his breast like, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. He's just at this low, humble state. He just sees his wretchedness to his core. And I'm like, that's me. That has to be me, because that's the guy who was justified at the end of this story. And how do I get there? How do I, see myself there? And that's not always an easy thing to do. I don't see myself as that every day. That's for sure.
Right. But correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like, especially nowadays, maybe many years ago, it was easier to think that way about yourself than it is now. Like, I'm a dead dog. Well, I mean, that doesn't sound like the kind of thing you would say to your kid. You are. If you say that, I agree. It's not, you're not supposed to do that. But at the same time, it kind of, and as I was kind of trying to press that home, I felt a little funny. It sometimes like people would go, I don't know
I feel like there's this cultural kind of faux pas, if you will, for saying that you're not a good person. Like there's this thing, for whatever reason, I don't know, we were just wrapped up in kind of this idea of good deeds. And so I think you dealt with it directly very well, in the sense that you were just like, okay, I think in Henderson anyway, you talked about how it's just about your good deeds. You got really, really passionate about that. They're useless. So you can be a good person. You said the example about you could have given 20 shirts off your back or whatever it was, because I feel like we live in a culture to where we want to be good so bad. And then when you read and you hear a message, the gospel that says, no matter how bad you want to be good, or no matter how many good things you do, you're just not apart from Jesus. I think it's very offensive in a sense.
Yeah, I can see why it is.
Absolutely.
There are no illusions. I think people, I'm just reading the data and throwing it out there thinking, I think I'm accurately communicating what this really is saying. All your righteousness is filthy rags and all that. But at the same time, I get why somebody would go, no, wait a minute, all my righteousness? I've done some pretty neat stuff in my life, that kind of thing. So, and the whole thrust of the idea, I kind of want to shift gears a little bit, that the idea of the table, that's the metaphor for the church that we're using. We're using metaphors. That's pretty neat. Yeah. So it's a table where all of us are Mephibosheths, and then think about what it would have been like for the people, for him, and then how do you think David's sons reacted, or for real? How do you picture them responding to? Okay, I've brought this guy in, and I think I said the message that when he first came in, he couldn't look very royal. I mean, he probably looked pretty rough, and so when they come. How do you think they reacted, or would you think they were all just cool and chill with it and everything was great and they welcomed him?
Well, I always go to these stories because I can kind of relate, because my parents, no, we're not royalty by any means, but my parents were very, very kind people, and they would bring in, like, I'd come home late at night in high school, and there'd just be kind of random strangers in our house that they were allowing. Like
people that like been standing on street corners and things.
Yeah,
and
they
they
didn't have anywhere to stay,
folks?
so they bring them home.
Wow!
And so literally, I'd have like 2 doors down from me some person that I don't know who they are sleeping there, and I'm like 19, so I'm like, I don't know really what to do about this. At the time, I was just like, are you kidding me? Like right now, like really? I don't know who they are. I don't know if they're going to knife me in the middle of the night. Or I don't know what's about to happen. I think reflecting on it, it was a great thing. But in the moment, identifying with David's sons, I was really just like, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? What's going on? We could all be asleep and taking our time. How are you out finding people that are homeless or have nowhere to stay and bringing them into our home? Like, it's just a weird thing.
Right. Okay.
So, but he took it a step farther and said, "You're going to eat at my table," right? So, this
like
person,
one of my sons.
Every meal, like one of my sons. Yeah, sit right there in the middle of it. Get the same portions, everything. Those portions. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, they could be super worried. Like, okay, well, what if this guy, he feels all high and mighty now? He's one of us. Well, what if one of his sons tries to take out one of my sons and get in line for the throne or something like that? I wonder if they would feel like super skeptical of this guy. They don't know his character.
Oh, that's true. Which you can run into people that you might, as you're trying to give care to or something like that. There can be. I'm suspecting your motives, or I hadn't thought of that angle before. That those guys would have been thinking, well, how do we know he's not going to knife us in our sleep or whatever else? And it's interesting.
Whether we're right or wrong,
you go through that kind of stuff. So, and the idea is pretty much to portray the church, and so. We are Mephibosheth. We finally realize that is us in the story. But the local church theoretically is supposed to be filled with people who have recognized that about themselves. Why do you think that happens, or do you think we struggle with it? It seems like the church does not have that reputation of people walking around all humble about their good needs.
I mean, growing up in the church, there was definitely an era of better than culture mentality. Like, we don't do these things, which people did. People just hid the wrong things they did, right?
Like, we're better hiding those things.
We're better at acting like
we don't do these things. Okay.
Acting like our lives are perfect or something like that. And, my family is just as guilty as anyone else, and so was I for a long time, and still am. Sorry, to a degree, I'm sure. But, you put your life and you do the compare game. I'm better than this person because I don't have that struggle.
Causes that? I mean, it's like we all know our gateway in. Everybody, when they first come to Christ, knows the score. We're like, okay, please have mercy on me, please. Yeah. And it's easy to get, but after you're in the game for several years, all of a sudden you're walking around feeling pretty good about yourself. And why do we lose that? Why does that happen? You think?
At some point, some way, it shifts. From my experience, I know I was raised in church as well. So it's like at some point it shifts from this idea of, oh my gosh, thank you so much for your forgiveness, Lord. I need your forgiveness to, okay, in order for me to maintain this forgiveness, I've got to do certain things. Like, I can't, cuss, smoke, drink, whatever it may be. I can't do these certain things because in order to be a good Christian, I have to do these certain things. So I think over the years, the church very unintentionally, I feel like, some of it was done with good intentions, but it was like this whole put your best foot forward and then pretend your back foot's kind of not there. You know what I mean? Kind of pretend your worst foot's not there. And so then, I don't know, I feel like over time we started to respect and really appreciate all these good, righteous things that we do to a place to where that's what we chased as opposed to a relationship with the Lord. And in Henderson specifically, and I'm sure Evansville as well, I think that the whole idea of church kind of being fake, and that's where that comes from in my mind, is that we lose sight of, like I guess Keller says, that we've forgotten what it's like to not be saved, or we've forgotten what it's like to be lost or not know Christ. And so, I don't know, I feel like some of that stemmed from just Christianity became behavior modification.
Well, it becomes kind of a classic question, though. So which is the solution to that? How do you avoid that? Do you just go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to smoke and drink, I'm going to cuss, and just throw it under grace and all that? I mean, I've seen people do that. I'm like, okay, it should be fine. And those are the cheap examples, obviously. Right. Is it that, or what is the solution? How do you keep that grace-filled humility happening, but at the same time living some kind of sanctified life? I mean, of course, they've been asking that for 2,000 years, and I'm pretty sure that Sarah has the answer to it.
I'm already looking at it.
I think that's the next book title that's coming. Sarah Inman writes about this.
I should write a book.
You should. Absolutely.
No, I'm actually still kind of on one of your questions from a couple questions ago, that I think might get to. Sorry.
Well, by all means, we'll probably figure out what it was.
Processing. No, you were asking about, what do you think David's sons felt like, and then I think it rolled into your next question of like, do you think the church always acts that way? And I started thinking that, honestly, if I were one of David's sons, I'd be like, what's this guy doing at my table? Like, he doesn't belong here. Right. Like, and I think a lot of times in churches, I've seen this over the years, and probably even, no, not probably, I know I've been this person where you almost like, you don't want to bring someone else new in because you feel like you've got it set. This is the way you want it to be. And if you bring someone else in, it's going to change it. It's going to make it, not the way you want it. And so I've had that but kind of that thought in groups before where it's like someone new comes in, you're sitting there and you're like, oh, okay, the whole dynamic's about to change, right? But it has to, right? I mean, exactly. It has to. And that's the way, if we're saying that our goal, one thing I was going to add, Ryan's mentioned a couple of times that in Henderson, One Life Church, if you're listening, you don't know who One Life Church is. We are one church in multiple locations. We have 3 campuses. And so you are hearing different perspectives of different communities, which is really cool. But I don't know. So the answer, what was the question that you guys thought I had the answer to?
Well, but that's the thing I wanted to point out, that you artfully answered a different question that brought up an even better thing. So I only care about that original question. It was something about smoking and drinking and cussing and all that sort of stuff. But because I'd like to really chase after that, because the way the message closed out and what has really struck me, and I've seen this because I love studying early church history, is that they were known to be revolutionary. They were known to have at the table if you were a slave, if you're an aristocrat, if you were, no matter what class of society you were in, you sat at that table and you were all brothers and sisters, and they called each other, and they were considered complete weirdos and revolutionaries to the Roman society. Now that's considered like, we all love that idea. It was the ultimate. One historian said that Christianity was the greatest egalitarian movement ever, the only true one, really, where everybody was equal, everybody was kind of. Now, but the problem is, and that's what Sarah, you brought up, is when we actually experience that kind of thing, a lot of times secretly we don't even like it that much. How do you handle that? Because I've been in groups where, man, the chemistry was exactly right and all this, and then someone comes in and the dynamics throw off. So how do you balance that longing to have that equal thing? We're all Mephibosheth, but I don't know, the realities of social interactions.
Yeah.
Is that, how do you handle that? Matt, you got that solved? You can write
No,
a book
I
on that.
don't. I mean, it's an ongoing struggle, just personally. But when it's happening right, you feel it. But I grew up in a Baptist church where everybody called each other brother. Right. Brother Mike was my dad. And I think the ethic that Paul creates for the church, that we are each other's brothers and sisters, it has to have that level, because when you have a family, there are members of your family who will do dumb things, will annoy you, and you treat them though with a greater level of patience. You make more sacrifices for them because they're family. Right. And Paul's trying to say, like, these people who are followers of Jesus along with you, that's the same level that this has now become for you. And Jesus even did that with his disciples. Like, they're my brother and my sister, my mother, my father. Like, there was this higher level of love that, and it's not saying it's easy to do, but that's the ethic. So it kind of helps me anyways put my life to it when I think of them. Okay, well, they're coming over to my house for group. Maybe I don't have a lot in common with them, but it's my brother. So how would I treat my own brother?
Right. And in your regular families, those of you who have siblings, how much alike are you socially?
Oh man, we're so different.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we're so different.
That's my mom.
Because I think you're onto something. That helped me a lot.
I think
really
like me and my oldest sister, because I'm the youngest of three and two older sisters. My older sister and I, we were like complete opposites when we were younger, but we've grown to kind of be a lot alike. But on that same thread, I've been in groups scenarios or whatever it may be. I mean, I guess in-laws kind of coming into the family is a good example of this. But I've been in groups to where you have incredibly tight-knit groups, and then somebody comes in, dynamic changes. And then I feel like as I reflect on that now, thinking back about why that is, I think it's because I've been with a group of people and we kind of started there, right, where things were kind of awkward and weird. But we had taken 2 years or so, and we had kind of navigated some of those weird things, and we had battled through. Well, now, whenever somebody else is coming in, and we have this kind of culture already established because we've accomplished something together, and then somebody comes and kind of threatens what we've accomplished, or it's got to be busted down and rebuilt with them in mind because somebody new means a different culture. But our friend Mark Weaver, he always says that if the group or if its behavior or whatever, if the reason or the origin, I guess as he says, of our group is just so that our group is happy and our group thrives or whatever, then we're gonna feel threatened when somebody else comes in. But if the origin is literally Christ-centered community, then we're gonna be able to kind of, or at least willing maybe, to reestablish culture and re-navigate some of the things that we did, or you busted up and started a new one.
At least we have that as an option. That's right. It's busted up and started a new one. So, really, I think the family thing helps a lot because I've never felt the requirement inside my family to be like my brothers or my sister in terms of how we interact, because we're not very much alike, and sometimes we're quite different. We have certain things in common, but in the end, they're in the room because they're family, and you just roll with it. You just kind of go, you're very, very different, and it makes for very animated discussions, is all it is, and that you think differently, but in the end, we're all family, and we're in this together is a pretty good way to do that. So thank you, Matt. I'm glad you showed up today. I appreciate that very, very much. So
we have actually been talking for 30 minutes.
Have we really?
Yeah.
30 minutes.
It goes fast.
It does go fast.
Especially when we're hanging out. Friends.
Yeah.
All friends. Even Thomas is behind the camera. Thomas Bernard, our media producer, is making sure if you're watching this version of the podcast. Yeah.
Thinking about something else.
Yeah. Making us smell coffee.
So in that case, it probably was good to end with a Mark Weaver quote, or at least a thought. He is, for those of you who may not know, he is one of our elders and has taught before and has just kind of this homespun wisdom that he gives out. So what we're doing I just want to keep you in mind that during the table, we are trying to rediscover what the local church really is, what God intended, because it does have a deserved reputation at times for just being a little bit of a dysfunctional or a lot dysfunctional place. And a lot of people have not had a very good experience in church, but I maintain the local church is good in the same way that family is good. Families, when they're good, they're phenomenal, and when they're dysfunctional, they're horrible. And the churches are very much the same way. And so we're hopefully going to rediscover kind of what that's all about. So end us out here, Sarah.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for listening or watching. If you're watching us, we would love to get any of your feedback or any questions you have. You can email us at right now at CAC. The letters C, A, and C at onelifechurch.org. We'd love your questions. I think we should end every podcast with a question for Bret.
A question?
Yeah. And it could be from a person.
Did you just come up with this?
Just came to my head.
Now? Okay.
Okay,
and so I don't know what the question is.
No, you have no idea. That's what's going to be fun about it. Is it's going to be a question. It could be like theological, or it could just be like something like, what's your favorite concert you've ever been to, or something like that. Like, let's get to know each other. But I think it could be fun. Matt, do you have one?
I thought of one.
Yeah, I could tell you were thinking it.
You ready?
I don't know if I'm ready or not, because I have no idea what it is. Hopefully it's that concert one.
For so long, you went no facial hair.
Oh, right.
And then now you have the goatee, sweet goatee thing. Yeah. I like it. I'm super used to it.
Right.
What do you think the next phase is? I mean, you can't stay goatee forever.
What is the next phase?
Yeah, in a few years.
Well, I know this is probably going to go, because I didn't expect it to come out gray, so I think it tacked about 10 years on to me. So the next phase will probably be it leaves. I could just go, we don't have a vote. I don't really know. So the next phase I've thought about, if I'm being really, really honest, I've thought about this because I just moved into what I call my retirement community. I'm in a condo, and then I am 53 now, and I thought, I did that so I could get ready for my senior years, and I definitely need to start eating different and being a lot more about my health, and so I'm hoping as I do that, I'll change my look, but the gray thing will probably go away, or I'll just diet awkwardly dark.
That's the one.
So everybody knows, what did he just do? So I can know I'm full on in a midlife crisis, but that may be the next phase. We'll see.
See, wasn't that fun?
That was
so much
great.
fun.
It was amazing. Yeah.
No, thank you guys for listening. If you haven't heard the message and you're kind of curious, you don't really know who Mephibosheth is, not sure what we're talking about, you can watch any of our messages at onelifechurch.org or on our One Life app. And we would love to hear and connect with you guys again on our next podcast. That'll be episode 2. Thank you, guys.
See ya.